Imagine standing in a desolate valley, bones scattered everywhere, the air thick with silence. What would you think if these bones began to rattle, to move, to come to life? Today, we dive deep into the mystic vision of Ezekiel and the Valley of Dry Bones. In this episode, we'll unravel the profound symbolism behind Ezekiel's vision, exploring its theological significance, historical context, and the spiritual truths it reveals about hope, restoration, and divine power. Brief background on the prophet Ezekiel. Ezekiel was a prophet and priest who lived during one of the most turbulent times in Israel's history. Born into a priestly family, Ezekiel was among the Jewish exiles taken to Babylon in the early 6th century BCE. His prophetic ministry began in 593 BCE, 5 years after he was exiled, and it spanned about 22 years. Ezekiel's life and ministry were profoundly shaped by the experience of exile, a theme that deeply influences his prophetic messages. Ezekiel was a unique prophet in many ways. Unlike other prophets who primarily spoke to the people of Israel within their land, Ezekiel delivered his messages from Babylon, addressing a community struggling with the trauma of displacement and the loss of their homeland. His prophecies were characterized by vivid, symbolic visions and enacted parables, intended to convey God's messages of judgment and hope to the exiled Israelites. Overview of the Book of Ezekiel and its major themes. The Book of Ezekiel is divided into several distinct sections, each reflecting different aspects of Ezekiel's prophetic ministry. The major themes can be outlined as follows. Judgment on Israel, chapters 1 to 24. 1. These chapters contain some of Ezekiel's most famous visions, including the vision of the glory of God departing from the temple, and the symbolic acts portraying the coming siege of Jerusalem. 1. Ezekiel's messages in this section emphasize the reasons for God's judgment on Israel, focusing on their idolatry, social injustices, and covenant unfaithfulness. Oracles against the nations, chapters 25 to 32. 1. In these chapters, Ezekiel pronounces judgment on the surrounding nations. 1. These prophecies highlight the universal sovereignty of God, demonstrating that he is not only the God of Israel but the Lord over all nations. 1. The messages of judgment serve to vindicate God's justice and sovereignty. Promise of restoration, chapters 33 to 48. 1. The latter part of Ezekiel is filled with messages of hope and restoration. 1. Following the fall of Jerusalem, Ezekiel's prophecies turn to the future restoration of Israel. 1. Key visions in this section include the Valley of Dry Bones, symbolizing the resurrection and renewal of Israel, and the vision of a new temple and a restored Jerusalem, representing God's renewed presence among his people. Ezekiel's prophecies are not just historical records, they are timeless messages that speak to the human condition, offering profound insights into themes of sin, judgment, repentance, and restoration. His visions, rich with symbolism and vivid imagery, continue to inspire and challenge readers to reflect on their own spiritual journeys and the overarching narrative of God's redemptive work in the world. The vision. Detailed narration of the vision as described in Ezekiel 37 1 to 14. In the book of Ezekiel, chapter 37, verses 1 to 14, the prophet Ezekiel recounts a profound and haunting vision given to him by God. The vision begins with Ezekiel being transported by the Spirit of the Lord to a vast valley. This valley is filled with countless dry bones, scattered across the ground, stark and lifeless. The scene is desolate and foreboding, a stark representation of death and desolation. God asks Ezekiel a poignant question, "Son of man, can these bones live?" Ezekiel responds, "Sovereign Lord, you alone know." God then instructs Ezekiel to prophesy to the bones, commanding them to hear the word of the Lord. As Ezekiel speaks God's words, a miraculous transformation begins to unfold. First, there is a rattling sound, and the bones start to come together, bone to bone. Tendons and flesh appear on them, and skin covers them, but there is no breath in them. Then, God commands Ezekiel to prophesy to the breath, to call upon the four winds to breathe into the slain, that they may live. Ezekiel obeys, and breath enters the bodies. They come to life, stand on their feet, and form a vast army. God explains to Ezekiel that these bones represent the people of Israel, who say, "Our bones are dried up and our hope is gone, we are cut off." But God promises that He will open their graves and bring them back to the land of Israel. He will put His Spirit in them, and they will live, knowing that the Lord has spoken and acted. Visualize the scene, the valley of dry bones, the prophetic command, the resurrection of the bones. Imagine yourself standing with Ezekiel in this vision. The valley stretches endlessly before you, littered with bones that have long since lost their flesh and marrow. The air is still, and the silence is almost palpable. As you survey the scene, you are struck by the sheer hopelessness and desolation. Ezekiel's voice breaks the silence as he begins to prophesy. The words echo through the valley, and suddenly, a faint sound begins to build, a soft rattling, like dry twigs brushing against each other. The bones start to move, clinking and clattering as they reassemble themselves into skeletons. Tendons stretch and grow, muscles wrap around the bones, and skin covers them, transforming the once lifeless bones into human forms. Yet, these forms lie still, lifeless without breath. Once again, Ezekiel speaks, this time to the breath, calling it from the four corners of the earth. A wind stirs, and as it sweeps through the valley, it fills the bodies with life. One by one, they begin to stir, to rise, until an entire army stands before you, vibrant and alive. This vision is not just a display of divine power but a powerful metaphor for renewal and restoration. It symbolizes the revival of the people of Israel, a message of hope that transcends time and speaks to anyone who feels lost, abandoned, or beyond redemption. It reassures us that no matter how dry or scattered our own bones may seem, the breath of God can bring new life and hope, transforming our desolation into an abundant, thriving existence. Theological analysis. Symbolism of the dry bones. Representation of the house of Israel, their exile, and spiritual desolation. The vision of the dry bones is a powerful allegory for the state of the house of Israel during the Babylonian exile. The dry bones symbolize the Israelites, who felt spiritually dead and hopeless in their displacement. Their homeland was destroyed, their temple lay in ruins, and they were far from the promised land. This desolation was not just physical but deeply spiritual, as the people felt abandoned and cut off from their God. Ezekiel's vision conveyed a message directly to these despairing exiles. The dry bones scattered across the valley illustrated their current condition, disconnected, lifeless, and without hope. Through this vivid imagery, God acknowledged their despair but also promised that this state was not final. Broader application to spiritual death and renewal. While the immediate context of the vision pertains to Israel, its broader application resonates with many spiritual journeys. The dry bones can represent any state of spiritual death or desolation where hope seems lost, and life feels devoid of purpose or connection to the divine. This symbolism extends beyond Israel's historical context to any individual or community experiencing a sense of spiritual dryness or exile. It speaks to those who feel spiritually barren, disconnected from God, or in the grip of hopelessness. The promise of the bones coming to life offers a profound message of renewal. No matter how spiritually desolate one may feel, there is always the potential for revival and restoration through the power of God. The breath of life. The significance of the breath, ruach, in Hebrew, symbolizing the Spirit of God. In the vision, the Hebrew word ruach is used, which means breath, wind, or spirit. This term is deeply significant, symbolizing the life-giving Spirit of God. When Ezekiel calls upon the breath to enter the reformed bodies, it is a direct invocation of God's Spirit to bring life where there was once death. The breath of life is not just a physical phenomenon, but a spiritual awakening. It signifies the infusion of divine life and vitality, transforming lifeless forms into living beings. This act of breathing life into the dead bones highlights God's sovereignty and His ability to renew and restore. Connection to the creation narrative and the breath of life in Genesis. The imagery of breath bringing life to the dry bones echoes the creation narrative in Genesis. In Genesis 2:7, God forms man from the dust of the ground and breathes into his nostrils the breath of life, making him a living being. This act of creation underscores the vital role of God's breath in imparting life. Ezekiel's vision draws a direct parallel to this foundational moment of creation. Just as God breathed life into the first human, He breathes life into the dry bones, symbolizing a new creation or rebirth for the people of Israel. This connection emphasizes that God, who created life in the beginning, is continually able to recreate and restore life, no matter how dire the circumstances. In both instances, the breath of life signifies more than just physical existence, it represents the presence and power of God within His creation. It is a reminder that spiritual renewal and revival are always possible through the Spirit of God, who can transform the most desolate situations into vibrant, life-filled realities. Historical context. The state of Israel during Ezekiel's time, including the Babylonian exile. Ezekiel's prophetic ministry took place during one of the most challenging periods in Israel's history, the Babylonian exile. This era was marked by tremendous upheaval and despair for the Israelites. In 597 BCE, the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar conquered Jerusalem and deported a significant portion of its population, including Ezekiel, to Babylon. This event was followed by a second, more devastating invasion in 586 BCE, resulting in the destruction of Jerusalem and the Temple, the heart of Jewish worship and identity. The exile was a time of profound crisis for the Israelites. Removed from their homeland and the Temple, they struggled with feelings of abandonment and questioned their relationship with God. The covenantal promises seemed broken, and the people's identity as God's chosen ones was in jeopardy. They faced not only physical displacement but also a spiritual and cultural crisis, wondering how to maintain their faith and practices in a foreign land. How the vision offered hope and a promise of restoration to the exiled Israelites. In this context of despair and dislocation, Ezekiel's vision of the Valley of Dry Bones emerged as a beacon of hope. The vision addressed the Israelites' feelings of spiritual and national death, offering a divine promise of revival and restoration. Message of renewal. 1. The vision directly confronted the despondency of the exiled Israelites. 1. The dry bones symbolized their current state, disconnected, lifeless, and without hope. 1. By depicting these bones coming together and being brought to life, the vision assured the exiles that their state of desolation was not permanent. 1. God had not abandoned them, instead, He had the power to revive and restore them, even from the depths of their despair. Promise of return. 1. The vision also carried a promise of physical restoration to the land of Israel. 1. God declared that He would open the graves of the exiles and bring them back to their homeland. 1. This promise of return was not merely about physical relocation but also about the re-establishment of their covenantal relationship with God. 1. It signified that God had not forgotten His people and would fulfill His promises to them. Spiritual reawakening. 1. The infusion of breath into the revived bodies symbolized a spiritual reawakening. 1. The breath, ruach, representing God's Spirit, indicated that the restoration would involve a renewed relationship with God, characterized by spiritual vitality and divine presence. 1. This renewal was not just national but deeply personal and spiritual, promising a transformed and reinvigorated community. Encouragement to remain faithful. 1. Ezekiel's vision encouraged the exiles to remain faithful and hopeful despite their current suffering. 1. It reassured them that their covenant with God was enduring, and His promises were reliable. 1. This message of hope was crucial for sustaining the community's faith and identity during their time in exile. In summary, Ezekiel's vision of the Valley of Dry Bones provided a powerful and multifaceted message of hope to the exiled Israelites. It promised national and spiritual renewal, a return to their homeland, and the enduring presence of God's Spirit. This vision reassured the Israelites that their future was not one of perpetual desolation but of divine restoration and renewed life. Spiritual insights. Hope and restoration. God's promise of revival and restoration for His people. Ezekiel's vision of the Valley of Dry Bones is a profound testament to God's unwavering promise of revival and restoration. Through the vision, God reassures His people that despite their exile and despair, He has the power to breathe new life into their situation. The vision serves as a divine commitment that He will restore Israel, bringing them back from their physical and spiritual exile to a place of renewed faith and prosperity. This promise of revival is not just for the nation but for each individual soul feeling lost or broken. Personal application. Finding hope and new life in seemingly hopeless situations. The message of hope and restoration transcends its historical context and speaks directly to anyone who feels overwhelmed by life's challenges. Just as the dry bones represented the desolate state of Israel, our own dry bones might symbolize personal struggles, failures, or moments of profound hopelessness. Ezekiel's vision encourages us to trust in God's ability to bring about transformation. It reminds us that no situation is beyond redemption and that through faith, we can find new life and purpose, even when all seems lost. Divine power and sovereignty. God's ability to bring life to the dead and restore what is lost. The vision vividly illustrates God's divine power and sovereignty. The act of bringing the dry bones to life is a powerful demonstration of God's ability to restore what is lost and revive what is dead. This miracle is not merely a physical resurrection but a profound symbol of spiritual renewal. It emphasizes that God's power is limitless and extends into every aspect of our lives. When we face situations that seem dead or irreparable, we are reminded of God's sovereignty and His capability to bring about miraculous change. Encouragement for viewers to trust in God's power in their own lives. The story of the Valley of Dry Bones serves as a call to faith and trust in God's omnipotence. It encourages viewers to look beyond their immediate circumstances and to place their trust in God's plan and power. By recognizing that God's Spirit can breathe life into the most desolate areas of our lives, we are inspired to hold on to hope and remain faithful. This trust is not passive. It calls for an active faith that believes in God's promises and looks forward to His intervention. In essence, the vision of Ezekiel not only reassures us of God's commitment to restoration but also calls us to recognize and trust in His supreme power. It inspires us to see beyond our current struggles and to believe in the possibility of divine renewal and transformation in our lives. Through this trust, we can experience the profound peace and hope that comes from knowing that God's power is at work within us, ready to revive, restore, and lead us into a future filled with His presence and promise. Real-life anecdotes. Share inspiring stories of personal or communal restoration. Story 1, Personal Restoration. Sarah's journey from addiction to recovery. Sarah was once ensnared in the grip of addiction, a cycle of despair that seemed impossible to break. Her life was a landscape of broken relationships, shattered dreams, and lost hope, much like the Valley of Dry Bones in Ezekiel's vision. However, through a faith-based recovery program and the unwavering support of a church community, Sarah began to experience transformation. With every step, she felt God's presence guiding her toward healing. Today, Sarah is not only sober but also a counselor, helping others find their way out of addiction, embodying the hope and new life promised by God's Spirit. Story 2, Communal Restoration, the rebirth of a torn community in a small town devastated by a natural disaster. The community faced overwhelming loss and destruction. Homes were leveled, livelihoods were ruined, and hope was in short supply. However, the community rallied together, inspired by their shared faith and a belief in God's power to restore. They rebuilt homes, supported each other emotionally and spiritually, and created a stronger, more resilient community. Their collective efforts mirrored the reanimation of the dry bones, showing that even in the face of overwhelming odds, God's promise of restoration can bring new life to a community. Story 3, Spiritual Renewal, Mark's return to faith. Mark grew up in a Christian household but drifted away from his faith during his college years. For years, he felt spiritually empty, like the dry bones scattered in the valley. A chance encounter with an old friend led him back to church, where he slowly began to reconnect with his faith. Through prayer, fellowship, and studying the Bible, Mark experienced a profound spiritual renewal. His story illustrates that no matter how far one might stray, God's Spirit is always ready to breathe new life into a willing heart. Relate these stories back to the vision of Ezekiel, illustrating the timeless relevance of this biblical message. These real-life stories of restoration and renewal are modern-day echoes of Ezekiel's vision. Just as God promised to breathe life into the dry bones of Israel, He continues to work in our lives today, transforming desolation into hope, and death into life. Sarah's journey, Sarah's transformation from addiction to recovery, is a powerful testament to God's ability to bring new life where there once was only death. Her story shows that no matter how hopeless a situation may seem, God's Spirit can revive and restore. Like the dry bones that came together and were filled with breath, Sarah's life was pieced back together, filled with new purpose and hope. The community rebirth, the story of the town's recovery from disaster, reflects the communal aspect of Ezekiel's vision. Just as the entire house of Israel was represented by the dry bones, the town's collective effort to rebuild and support each other highlights the power of communal faith and action. Their restoration serves as a modern example of how God's promise of renewal can manifest in a community, bringing people together in hope and shared purpose. Mark's return to faith. Mark's spiritual renewal parallels the spiritual reawakening that God promised to Israel. His journey back to faith shows that God's Spirit is always at work, ready to revive our hearts and restore our connection to Him. Just as God breathed new life into the dry bones, He breathed new faith and purpose into Mark's life, illustrating the timeless relevance of Ezekiel's vision. These stories underscore the enduring message of Ezekiel's vision, that no matter the depth of our despair, God's Spirit is capable of bringing about profound restoration and new life. This message continues to inspire and offer hope, reminding us that with faith, we can overcome any adversity and experience the transformative power of God's love. As we conclude our exploration of Ezekiel and the Valley of Dry Bones, remember that Decode Vale is committed to your spiritual growth. We invite you to join our community of seekers and thinkers, to engage with us, and to share your reflections. What are your thoughts on Ezekiel's vision? Have you experienced moments of restoration in your life? Share your reflections in the comments below. Let's create a community of spiritual seekers and thinkers. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the Valley of Dry Bones. May the insights we've uncovered today inspire you to seek deeper spiritual truths and embrace the transformative power of faith. Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and stay inspired.